Andrew, and now over to Bruce.
Well, it's really great to be here, and I must say Andrew's quite right, and the other speakers. There's more here tonight than in many meetings I've been to in the last 4 or 5 years. Things are beginning to develop. More interest, more people coming, more people concerned about the expenditure and so on. So I'm quite really pleased with what I'm seeing tonight. I'd like to thank those, especially Rose down there and her children, who almost single-handedly raised the petitions today in the marketplace, if it was the marketplace here in Bristol. There was a long period when I was well known, and then there was a long period where I was hardly known, and there was a long period I wasn't known at all. In fact, someone came up to me about 2 years ago and said, "Are you Bruce Kent?" I said, "Yes." "Oh, I thought you were dead." I thought that was a bit blunt. And then on the tube, someone was reading a newspaper with his wife. And you could always tell on the news when they were looking at you, they're looking around the paper like this. And I was sitting next to my wife. And finally this guy came up and said, "I'm really sorry to ask you this, but my wife insists that I ask. Can you tell me who you were when you were important?" It's a true story. Well, things are developing. I can tell you, if you want to be important in C&D, there's a very simple formula. Just keep living. The older you get, the more important you are in C&D. It's like a Chinese setup or something, I don't know. We had yesterday at Aldermaston Hetty Bauer, 107 years old. Got a wonderful cheer, old Hetty. 107 years old. Wonderful. It spoke very clearly. I want peace on this earth. I want peace between countries. So, come down one. What have you got next? Walter Wolfgang. He must be 92, 3, I don't know, something like that. He was the one who got chucked out of the Labour Party meeting a few years ago. Well, goodness, he'd given him head of steam on old Walter. He was roaring away all over the place. Enormous cheer. I'm only a tiddler. I'm only 83 compared to this. But anyway, I'm on the way up. So anybody here in their 70s, 80s, hang on, you'll be famous in due course. I want to tell you why we've got Trident. Not everybody knows, but I'll tell you why we've got Trident. It's quite simple. Because I've got the secret out of a cabinet minister of 79, which was written out in 81. It's a discussion between Mrs. Thatcher, Lord Carrington, and Mr. Knott. Do anybody remember those people? You do. Knott probably faded a bit, but Carrington, the only man who was really honourable, he resigned over the Falklands and pushed off. But anyway, they're having a private discussion. And what are they talking about? They're talking about Trident. And what are they saying? It's essential to discuss all the issues about this because 2/3 of the party and 2/3 of the cabinet were opposed to the procurement of Trident. 1979, inner secrets of the Conservative Party. 2/3 opposed to the appointment of Trident. Well, why did we go on from there? Even the chiefs of staff were not unanimous. He believed, the secretary, I think not, that we wanted 5 submarines, not 4, but anyway. The foreign secretary said there was no doubt about the decision. We have to go ahead with it. Failure to acquire Trident would have left the French as the only nuclear power in Europe. Crude, basic British nationalism. That's why they said, oh, God, if the French are the only ones, we're going to have it. And exactly what they did. Exactly paralleled to Ernest Bevin in 1947, who came in after a slightly sloshed lunch with the American ambassador, who had told him that you'd get no more nuclear secrets in Britain because of the spies, Fuchs and others, who'd been leaking secrets out of Aldermaston thing. No more information of the United States. Ernest Bevin was so cross, he went to a meeting, a cabinet meeting, half a meeting, with a number of civil servants who were telling Attlee not to go ahead with nuclear weapons right at the beginning, which was Attlee's own persuasion. In barges Bevin, bangs the table, gives the story of his lunch, which he was very mortified about, that had then so insulted the British, and he said, I don't care what they cost, I want them over here with a bloody great Union Jack on top. Oh. 2 episodes of British nationalism have taught us exactly where we are. That kind of ignorance is what led us into this whole, and not just British ignorance. Every country that's gone nuclear, French including, it's because with the national status is so important. I think that we heard absolutely correctly that everybody knows all the arguments against. I'd like to 3 that need a little bit of attention, I think. One is independence. British nuclear weapons are not independent. It's important that we get that over. Harold Wilson called them the Moss-Bros deterrent. You hire them from somebody else. You can't call them independent when you have to ship your missiles, which aren't yours, back to the United States once a year to be refurbished. The Moss-Bros deterrent. We wouldn't have one. If the United States says, we're not going to service your missiles, finish. I think it's highly likely, I don't know enough of the technology, that we couldn't even target our missiles because of the satellite systems which are the United States. I think that's very probable. But they won't tell you that in the MOD. But the missiles, it's blatant. They go back to Georgia Bay or somewhere every year to be redone. They're not independent. Second point that I don't think gets enough attention is the question of accidents. The seabeds of our oceans are littered. I think 20 nuclear submarines, some with missiles on board, on the ocean beds of this world because of accidents. There's a hydrogen bomb buried in the ice somewhere up Iceland which has not yet emerged. The Americans dropped hydrogen bombs off Spain in the Mediterranean and spent most of a summer digging up the topsoil. Those were accidents which would not have produced war. Let me tell you about Stanislaus Petrov, in case you don't know him, because I think it's something everybody in the media ought to know. Petrov, a colonel in the Soviet army, the forward observer for the Soviet Union in September 1983, at a time when Reagan was calling the Soviets the evil empire and all that lot, enormous tensions, NATO about to run a great military exercise in Western Germany with everything moving around, including nuclear weapons on vehicles. And Petrov is watching the western sky through his instruments, and he suddenly sees a missile trace coming from the west to the east, and behind that 4 other missile traces coming. And bunker, a number of the people in the bunker said this is a Western preemptive nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. Petrov really didn't know, but his duty was to ring up the Soviet Union and say, we're under attack, as I think we're under attack. If he'd done that, I think the chances of Andropov, whoever the old gentleman was, probably in his dotage at that stage, would have been to say, well, fire 5 back. And if 5 had been fired back, we would be into World War III. And actually, after half an hour, 40 minutes, it was an atmospheric condition, and there were no missiles. But he thought, and they thought, there was a strong likelihood there was. That's how close. Exactly the same as the Soviet naval officer during the Cuba crisis on the floor of the ocean, the Caribbean Ocean, when after the top lot had done their peace deals, he didn't know what was happening, and the captain, in a temperature of 40 degrees centigrade, half the crew fainted. He said, for the honor of the Soviet Navy, we will fire our nuclear torpedoes. And his second in command said, yes, that's for the honor of the Navy. The third in command, who also controlled a key, said, we might be starting World War III. And we didn't fire, they didn't fire the things. So accidents, I think, have to be known about and talked about. And lastly, I think we just talk about Trident in terms of our money, 100 billion. It's a very moving argument, 100 billion. But I think also we should say this is the key to unlocking the whole issue of global nuclear disarmament. If we start saying we're not going to go ahead, and at the same time we're going to negotiate seriously with the other nuclear powers on the existing draft treaty and begin to move forward on this, even this morning, anybody listen to Radio 3, anybody awake in the early morning, as I had to be, we're talking about a draft treaty about stopping selling weapons. What if we could do that? What's so wonderfully mysterious about getting rid of nuclear weapons? Treaties are possible. But at the moment, our country refuses even to negotiate. So I think those are 3 arguments are important. But the most important thing, how long have I got before you shut me up? Another 2 minutes, all right. I think the most important thing is how do we actually get out of this room to all the people who aren't interested or don't know? And there are plenty of them. We saw them today. Not everybody signed up, I have to say. You've got that technique of trying to give out a leaflet, and people go almost around the block to avoid it, or to pretend they haven't seen you, or whatever, as if you were offering them some pornographic contribution or something.
They might take it.
No, I wasn't. So, how do we get to those people? I'm afraid I made some of them rather annoyed this morning, because I said, many of the British people are rather like sheep. And some of them looked up and I went, meh! I won't do that again because I think some of the Bristolians are a bit cross. But they were like sheep, and we are like sheep. About 70% of the people in this country aren't animated about anything, to do anything at all, except go home and watch the telly or go to the shops or whatever. So I think we've got a lot to do. And these are some of the things that I've been doing that I think others could do as well in their own way. How do you convert the people who aren't interested at this stage? That's the question. Not how many people we can have in this meeting. We had a protest the other day about the cutting of the accident and emergency unit at our Whittington Hospital. And that wasn't me, but somebody managed to get into the literature about it. Why are we cutting this and we're still spending money on Trident? Bringing it right down to the floor of what people are hurting on, what's hurting them about cuts, and identifying it with Trident. The bishops of the Church of England, God bless them, about 40, I'm serious, they sent a great letter the other day about poverty, how the government was whacking the poor of this country. Well, I wrote to them and I said, yeah, fine, but we're spending £10 billion on Trident. Next time you're going to mention this, could you mention Trident? I don't know whether they will or not, but at least the opportunity was there taken up there to say it. Members of Parliament. I sometimes imagine that the only true and perfect members of Parliament are potential members of the Labour Party. God bless you. Well, I hope you get there. But there are actually some Tories who don't agree with Trident. And we heard before from the previous minute. This is Aubrey Jones. Ever heard of Aubrey Jones? I'm sure he's somewhere in a grave somewhere. But right back in 1962, he said, the logic is inescapable. Sooner or later, we have to face it. The deterrent is a decaying asset, and decaying assets are better given up sooner rather than later. Let's quote them back to them and treat them like intelligent people. Nuclear weapons in our hands are not intelligent, unintelligent. And I think we should go to the Tories as well. Letters to the press. I never give up on getting a little 2-paragraph letter into the press. It's quite easy, really. You've only got to say that this pavilion, the news item, the pavilion is breaking down because the cricket team can't afford enough money in Little Wallop. So you write as a resident of Little Wallop saying, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we got some money from Trident to repair the cricket pavilion? It goes down like a bomb. Oops, sorry. It goes down very well always. Find yourself an access for a local letter. There's a great pilgrimage. I don't care whether our friend here is not of my persuasion, whether you're a believer or unbeliever, but there's a great pilgrimage from Iona, coming all the way down the east coast of England, ending up in London on the 19th of July, and going to all key places, Durham, Newcastle, whatever, Edinburgh, all the way across. Well, they're going to meet dozens of people, and the point of the pilgrimage is economic justice and cancelling Trident. Well, we should be latching onto that, looking up their websites, trying to get friends in that area to start thinking about this and what they can do. Perhaps you could have a similar march from Bristol to London to join them on the 19th of July. That's another idea, Rose. Could you take that up? Do you mind? Just another little thought. So I think that the important thing is that we act now, not in the future, because at the Labour Party, and clearly if there's going to be an alternative government, it's going to be a Labour government. That's the fact in this situation that we are in this country. It's going to be Labour, and the Labour government is now kind of cooking a policy, and it doesn't know which way to go. 2 major Labour MPs came out 2 days ago saying, oh, the MP for the Rolls-Royce factory in Derby, so we must have our nuclear deterrent. There's a debate going on. John Cruddas, who is in charge of the putting together of the policy, I think is really on our side. He is. But there's this mix. And we've got to show the Labour Party that it's actually a vote winner. In Scotland, even 75%, even those who don't want independence, don't want Trident. 75%, it's a vote winner. It can be a vote winner here too, easily, if we can get the message out. There are better things on which we could spend £100 billion, and ordinary people respond to that very easily, as we saw this afternoon. I think that's all for now. This is not a campaign for the Labour Party. It's a campaign for anybody who wants to talk sense about a more peaceful world, where we don't call peace threatening each other. But the obstacles are very big. The little boy today, the last question, I don't think I told you this, he and his little gang came over to me, and I said, to take a leaflet. He looked at it. He said, well, it gives us security. About 14 years old. I said, against whom? And he said, against North Korea. Now, where did a 14-year-old get the idea that North Korea is about to attack Great Britain? That's the level of propaganda that we're up against.